if you want South Africa to run away from coal, what is the alternative? In the short, in the medium, and in the long term. Of course, in the long term, they would say, okay, fine, we might move away from coal. But what is going to happen?
What needs to happen?
Yes, between now to maybe 2050, because the population is increasing, the demand is not going down. Those who are already on the grid are already suffering some load shedding here and there. You want to make that even worse, you must first of all find an alternative.
From the ground to the grid, Africa has got the resources, but how do we thrive when we do not correctly leverage the vast resources at our disposal? Welcome to Blindspot Africa, the podcast where stakeholders come together to shape the future of Africa's energy and extractive resources. Listen to fresh insight and real dialogue on how inclusive resource governance can be beneficial for all Africans.
Welcome to the Blindspot Africa podcast, a space where we shine the light on the issues too often overlooked in conversations about governance, accountability, and Africa's development journey. I'm Kodzo, and I'll be your host. Today we have an interesting conversation with one of the regional bodies, a representative from one of the regional bodies that is looking at energy across Africa. We have our colleague, Bob Felix Ocitti, who is a senior policy officer in charge of research, oil and gas program at the Africa Energy Commission of the African Union. And his work covers energy policy development, advocacy and technical support to AU member states in the oil and gas sector. Bob Felix, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
How have you been?
I've been very well, and it's always good to come to Accra, and I'm happy to visit the African Center of Energy Policy offices, and it's always a pleasure to have this kind of conversation.
Great. So some of our followers may be wondering, what is AFREC? What is the Africa Energy Commission? What do you do? And why is your work important to some of these conversations that we've been having?
Yes. So the African Energy Commission of the African Union is actually a specialized entity of the African Union. It was established way back in 2001 by a decision of heads of states meeting in Lusaka, and it was eventually rolled out into operations in 2008 by the ministers in charge of energy on the continent. And the institution was created mainly to support member states on aspects to do with advocacy, technical support, policy development within the energy sector. And we work on about 8 pillar programs. So we work on the first one is on the African Energy Statistics Information System, where we basically collect statistical data on the energy sector on the continent. Right now we're doing a lot of work even in delivering SDG number 7. We track that on the continent besides other energy statistical data. So that's one of the programs we do. The other one that we also do is the African Energy Transition Program, where we're looking at trying to balance between our obligations to fight climate change, but also meet the energy demand gap on the continent, because the continent still grapples with a lot of energy policy. So we are trying to make sure that we design a program that meets this two-pronged approach to our energy systems, because in 2022 the African Ministers of Energy came up with something known as the African Common Position on Energy Access and Just Transition. So at the center of that position is the idea that the continent still has a lot of gap to bridge in as far as energy access is concerned, both when we're talking about electricity access or clean cooking access and generally. So they said we should be able to use all our energy sources on the continent. That means both renewables and non-renewable energy sources in order for us to be able to bridge that energy gap. So we have a program on energy transition. The third one that we are implementing is on renewable energies.
All right.
So we have a program on renewable energy where we are promoting development of renewable energy because we think that we should be able to have a balanced mix in our energy system. And the continent is known to have up to about 40% of renewable energy potential.
All right.
So if we can tap, energy from solar, which is a technology that is well known now and available on the continent easily, we can be able to increase that. We also have a lot of potential for hydropower. I think the Grand Renaissance has shown us the potential that the continent can have as far as generating energy from hydro is concerned. And if we can increase that even with the Inga Dam, which is being planned to service the Central African region, that would go a long way. There's also a lot of geothermal potential. I think Kenya has done very well on geothermal development. And I know that other countries are trying to look at how they develop. I think Uganda is trying to do something along those lines as well. We also see a little bit of wind technology also being implemented. But so those are some of the aspects that we're trying to promote in as far as renewable energy is concerned. So the fourth program that we run at AFREC is bioenergy development, which we think that we should be able to modernize the use of bioenergy so that we can also reach that gap of energy. The fifth one is the oil and gas program, which I lead. And what we basically do there is to try and promote mainly domestic utilization of our oil and gas resources, because the continent is a net exporter of oil and gas, but a net importer of the products that come with oil and gas. So what we're trying to do is say, how can we change this?
So you mean a net exporter of the crude?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We export crude a lot. And now what we have seen even in this crisis at the moment that we are experiencing from the Middle East, we have learned the hard way, because if we were in that place where we have expanded domestic utilization, for example, refining capacity on the continent, we would have been in a much better place. Of course, we have seen how Dangote has supported the lot of the African, especially from the western part of Africa, by bridging that and substituting imports of products by domestically refining, and his ambition to replicate that 650,000 barrel per day refinery in East Africa and perhaps other regions will go a long way in giving us that self-sustaining supply whenever we need it. So that is one of the things that we are looking at in the oil and gas program that was run. But we are also looking at how we can harmonize policies. One of the policies that we are embarking on is the clean fuel standard specification for the continent. When you look at our fuel standards, if you take a property like sulfur content, we have for gasoline alone, we have, I think, almost 12 admissible specifications.
Right.
And for diesel, we also have equally immense specification. Wide, range of specifications on the continent. But if we could bring those specifications, like for sulfur content, to perhaps maybe 10 or just about 50 ppm max, we will be doing very well in terms of clean fuel content for standard for the continent. So those are some of the areas we're looking at in the oil and gas program. The other one is decarbonization.
Right.
Because we actually think that if we're going to trade among ourselves with hydrocarbons, then we also need to do it sustainably. And sustainability means we should be able to be conscious of our carbon footprints. And that's why we are promoting the methane abatement programs, capacity building on methane. And I'm happy that we have been working closely with ASEP and other partners in that space to try and promote awareness, action to reduce methane emissions in the oil and gas sector. Quickly, the other program we run is the capacity building and country support. That is where we actually, build capacity and support member states to cooperate among themselves. We are supporting a lot of peer skills transfer. Last year, we supported Namibia working together with South Africa in understanding how South Africa is working on their smart grid technology.
Right.
So that's one of the things that we also doing. We have also been supporting with support from our partners. SIGA, we supported Madagascar, Gambia, and Botswana in their energy transition strategy. So these are some of the things we also do in terms of the capacity building and country support. The last but not least is clean cooking. And clean cooking is a big problem on the continent. I know we always go for conferences. We hear that big number, about 1 billion people.
Yeah.
And every time people ask us that, why is that number doesn't change? Every year you're talking about 1 billion. It's now several years talking about 1 billion. The answer is simple, that we are actually making effort. A lot of countries have made effort towards clean cooking access. In fact, Ghana has done tremendously well on that front as well. And many other sub-Saharan African, because that's where the biggest problem, the challenge is. But we also get more people because the population of the continent is increasing significantly every year. And so you get more people into energy poverty compared to those who are actually getting access. But also we just need to scale up some of our clean cooking solutions. A number of partners that we are working with, some of them are not willing to support things like LPG. And yet statistics show that for the last 5 years, 90% of clean cooking access on the continent was done using LPG. That means we cannot ignore the contribution of LPG in as far as clean cooking access is concerned in Africa. So these are some of the programs that we do at AFREC and why we do them and to the what extent that we're actually applying them.
Right. Thank you for taking us through AFREC and what you do. Very interesting work. And I think we'll pick up from where you ended on clean cooking. Right. The question I wanted to ask, even before you brought in the LPG, was, are we deploying the right solutions for which the gap never seemed to be closing? Because for all intents and purposes, LPG is still a fossil fuel.
Yep.
In domestic markets, LPG is still a target for taxation, which is making it expensive for communities, even for the urban poor, right? To make that quick switch from wood fuels to LPG. So have we explored the wide array of solutions that are possible, including looking at other types of fuel away from LPG that, I mean, governments so often like to place a lot of taxes, because the switch is one that is going to be driven by economics, not by people's consciousness of the environment. So are we looking at the right solutions?
Absolutely. No, you are absolutely right. And for many households, it boils down to affordability.
Right.
And that's why even when we're talking about solutions to clean cooking, you're looking at the different arrays of fuels that are available in the market. And we're saying, which one can a household actually be able to afford? So we are balancing the energy trilemma that we were talking about energy security, you were talking about affordability and sustainability, and then climate compatibility, and so we have that trilemma. So affordability features very prominently, and even when you're choosing the type of fuel to apply for clean cooking, so we're looking at that now. The aspects of LPG is also about readily available and scalable. Because if you take, for instance, you want to do e-cooking. E-cooking is good, but you need the access, first of all, to the electricity itself. Now, if you cannot have access to the electricity itself, then it becomes difficult for you to promote e-cooking. So, and yet you need to ask yourself, if you have that electricity, where is it coming from? Is it a renewable source, or it is still a fossil, driven electricity, or it is a renewable energy driven electricity? So, at the end of the day, you find that you want to avoid a scenario of a catch-22 where you seemingly think that you are promoting clean cooking, but on the other side, you're actually increasing the cost because you're looking at a fuel that is perhaps more costly, and that brings in government to probably apply subsidies. When I'm saying this, it doesn't mean that government is not putting subsidies on LPG. In fact, for most of the LPG projects, there's a level of subsidies where, for example, front-loading costs on government for like the first cylinder. But we have had a lot of development partners that are supporting. I think the IEA had the summit in 2024 that raised, at least got commitment of more than 2.4 billion US dollars. I think the last time I checked, we had received close to perhaps 600 million of that. And we have not reached the 2.5 billion commitment mark, but it's progress. And this year, they're going to have another Clean Cooking Summit in Nairobi. The expectation is that commitments will be more tangible. Of course, ultimately, what we have seen in our climate ambition in terms of interventions to, combat climate change is that most often than not, commitments are not followed by real tangible action. But we think that what is readily available when we are talking about clean cooking, the fuels are there. You can talk about the biofuels. You can talk about the e-cook. You can talk about, the efficient stoves, cook stoves that are already. You can talk about briquettes. You can talk about all these other solutions that are outside there. But is it affordable? Is it scalable? Is it readily available for mass, deployment? So those are the things you ask. And what we have seen is that what is easily deployable, scalable, and available is LPG.
Yeah, but that also locks us into a future
Yeah.
of clean cooking that is dependent on a fuel source we are all moving away from?
Not necessarily. And that is where I think we need to sort of correct the narrative, because you see, what we should do, for example, right now what we see is that renewable energy in our energy mix is slowly increasing. In fact, it's the fastest growing in the last few years, but not at the same pace with demand. So demand is sort of outpacing the pace at which renewable energy is growing. So if you want to have a much more cleaner cooking method than using hydrocarbon, then you need to scale up the generation from renewable energy source, because that's the cleanest way to go E, as long as the E source is clean. The other one, you would probably think, okay, maybe we go nuclear, and nuclear generates for us, the other electricity source that we'll need. Then we can all go E and forget about the LPGs of this world, and probably natural gas, through piping and things like that. So that in itself means we have to scale up the renewable energy to move in tandem with demand. But also we should be able to have the infrastructure in place to go to the last mile person that needs access to that, e-cooking method that is the cleanest when it comes to the solution for cooking.
Right. We'll come to that infrastructure angle later in the conversation. But I want us to now look at another part of the work that you do, which is generating data and statistics for the African continent. Who uses that data? Because oftentimes the perception is that you just publish reports. What's the value of producing that data?
Yeah. Data is a very important tool for policy making. And first of all, let me take you back to how we generate the data, because as AFREC, we rely a lot on our member states, because our member states are the ones that actually have the hands-on on the ground to actually collect this data. So we rely a lot on our member states in the collection of our data. In fact, we have focal points in every ministry of all the AU member states, whom we work with every year to try and collect data. And our data is always a year -2, which means that to get a complete data. Of course, we have a year -1, but sometimes it's not complete. As you can know, it's very difficult to always get 100% data immediately after the year ends. So we're in 2026, so the data we're publishing is 2024. We already have some data for 2025, but we keep filling them. By next year, we should be able to have full for 2025. Now, what usually happens is that we get this data. Of course, we upload them on our website. We allow it to be accessible to stakeholders. And because it's available for utilization, we now can't control or go to find out who is using it or who doesn't use it. But I know that many people actually access our data and utilize it for their policy assessment. Without data sets, it's very difficult for you to assess policy. For example, we just published the SDG number 7 report for Africa last year, by end of last year. And we relied on the data set that we received from our member states. We also think that think tanks and centers like yours, African Center for Energy Policy, we have others, the African Forum for Renewable Energies, and so on and so forth. They can as well have access to our data. Of course, data sets usually is as good as the source and the collection method that you receive. And for us, if the data we receive, usually what we do is we go through a validation process with the member states. And now our team that are handling the data statistics units usually go to they're moving now in different countries, try and validate those data sets, but also train the focal points in different countries to actually collect the right set of data using the right unit with the right quality. And this capacity has been built across the continent now. I think they have just come back from Kodzo in Central Africa, to where they are trying to train more data statisticians who can be able to get the right quality of data and publish. So we rely a lot on our focal points and our member states, but also we publish our data so that different policy centers can be able to access them, and many other countries can also be able to access them to design the kind of policy that best fits the outcome of those data sets.
All right, you are still with us on the Blindspot Africa podcast, where we have today Bob Felix Ocitti, who is a senior policy officer at the Africa Energy Commission, working on the research on oil and gas program. He's been discussing the work that they do at the Africa Energy Commission, and I've been asking him some questions from clean cooking. Today is going to be one of the episodes where we talk about everything that concerns energy in Africa. So we've been talking about clean cooking, we've been talking about data and statistics, and please do stay with us while we continue the conversation.
You're listening to Blindspot Africa. In this podcast, we delve deeper into critical issues of resource governance, including those that may not typically be highlighted in the media. We discuss the facts, figures, challenges, and pathways for Africa to achieve its full wealth potential. We also illuminate strategies on how citizens can demand accountability for resources managed on their behalf. Stay tuned for more insights.
I mean, there have been conversations on Africa having a common position. You mentioned the EU has adopted a common position on the energy transition, and there are people who are of the view that is a very difficult thing to have, especially when the context of the energy needs of countries are different. What Kenya, for example, will agree to for the energy transition will be different from what Nigeria will agree to. So why do we think that having a common position on energy transition as a continent is something that is going to help us?
And therein lies actually the point for the common position. Because you see, the common position was developed so that the position of the continent is very clear. Because that was the aspirations of the ministers of energy, how they saw it. And exactly what you're saying. Because they realized that there are countries that are very much advanced in their renewable energy space.
Right.
But there are countries that are almost totally dependent on fossil fuels. You see, take for instance, I live in Algeria. Algeria is one of, the high producers of natural gas and as well as crude oil. And they have 99.9% access to electricity. I don't worry about my electricity going off as much as I worry about it when I'm in Uganda. So, but Uganda also is over 90% generating electricity from hydro. So you can see there more than 90% from fossil, Uganda is more than 90% from renewable, from hydropower. And that is replicated across the continent. And there are those who are balancing the two, take, for instance, Kenya is generating, I think, quite a significant amount, perhaps 40 or 50% from geothermal. Okay. And they're mixing that with perhaps fossil fuels as well and others. So if you go to South Africa, for example, you see that they're still relying a lot as well on coal, but they're trying to also, increase their renewable energy. So if you look at how the energy landscape in different countries on the continent are, you'll find that there are those who are still very heavily dependent on fossil fuel, and those that are really accelerating towards renewable energy, like Ethiopia. So that was the essence of coming up with a common position. And you see, because we are an African Union, we are, a multilateral institution, an international body for the continent, we needed to build consensus around something that we agree on. So the common position at its core is looking at how to balance these two, aspects. And that is why you see we talk about energy access and just transition. So in the just there, we are looking at not meeting our climate ambition and our climate commitment without jeopardizing our economic progress. Because at the center of it, we are saying, okay, our natural resources should be able to meet, our economic transformation aspirations and agenda. Because when we are talking about Agenda 2063, we need that self-reliance in terms of energy as well for us to actually be able to achieve those aspirations. In terms of minerals development, we need to, ensure that we achieve the vision of the Africa mining vision, because it's about a self-sustaining economy on the continent, but we need energy. When we're talking about industrialization, there is no country in the world that develop without industrialization. But if you want to industrialize, you have to think about the source of energy for industrialization. And we know for a fact that most of the first world countries that have developed now, they're industrialized based by using fossil fuel. And at least up to now, we believe that renewable energy alone cannot help most of our countries to achieve that industrialization aspiration. So it means that we have to be able to still, increase our renewable energy uptake, but also meet our other industrialization agenda and needs. And that is where the basis of the common position came in to say, okay, on the continent, we have potential for both renewable energies, but we also have potential for non-renewable, which has been traditional, the fossil fuel sector. If you want South Africa to run away from coal, what is the alternative? In the short, in the medium, and in the long term. Of course, in the long term, they would say, okay, fine, we might move away from coal. But what is going to happen?
What needs to happen?
Yes, between now to maybe 2050, because the population is increasing, the demand is not going down. Those who are already on the grid are already suffering some load shedding here and there. You want to make that even worse, you must first of all find an alternative. But also the fact that the continent contributes a much, much lower percentage of carbon in the global scheme of things.
But it doesn't mean we should also contribute.
I agree fully, and actually that is usually the argument. I agree fully that even, when we were promoting methane abatement program at the African Energy Commission, sometimes people say, but the continent doesn't produce so much. Yeah, why are we? So, but we said every molecule matters. Every molecule matters in the climate agenda. So, however small our contribution is, if we can substitute it, that is one molecule less of carbon emission in the atmosphere, for which we are fighting to have our climate reverse the trend that it is in. So we understand that as a continent, we must be able to play our role. But also we believe that that in itself should not jeopardize the interest for our economic development. But every single country on the continent at least is aware of their obligation to fight climate change. But that doesn't mean that they should run away from fossil fuel, which they can do, but when they are developing it, they must do that sustainably. And sustainability means with the lowest possible footprint. And by the way, it's taking shape. Take, for instance, the progress Nigeria has made quite significantly. 10 years ago, you could watch the flares from Niger Delta from space. Okay, some of them are still visible, but at least if you juxtapose the 10 years ago plus today, you will see the difference. Okay, Algeria is picking up on that. We have seen now one of the longest, crude oil pipeline, being built in East Africa, EACOP, having, a lot of power from renewable energy into its, heating and pumping stations along the pipeline. Those are development and innovative ways in which we reduce carbon footprints in hydrocarbon operations. And we are seeing many other, central processing facilities getting power from the grid, which grid is renewable, hydro. All those are innovative ways in reducing carbon footprint, because traditionally oil and gas operations, they used to burn crude. I mean, why would you bother getting a transmission line from the grid to bring it to some remote processing facility when you can burn crude directly into a generator and we get electricity all over? That's how rigs are operated with diesel power. So that is changing. And most of the operators within the oil and gas sector are very conscious about reducing their footprint, because it also helps with their reputation, but also shareholders' standing when it comes to their global contribution to the fight against climate change.
Right. Another area where there is a call for a common position has been on critical minerals, but we are not discussing critical minerals here. Where people are asking that we should forcefully demand in-country processing of these minerals, so that we are able to reverse the trade dynamics that are associated with the extraction of these minerals. But one of the biggest challenges to that ambition has been the cost of power. Right. And we have also not been able to successfully, build power pools that are able to offset some of these costs. How is your work with governments tackling the issue of cost of power and its impacts on the industrialization
and mining sector
and mining ambitions of the continent?
Critical minerals, that's a conversation for another day, including whether to call it critical or strategic.
That's why I say we will not discuss it today, but we just look at the energy part of
the energy
converting.
First of all, just like industrialization I've mentioned, which is a component to that, mining is energy intensive.
Right.
Quite energy intensive, especially when you're talking about processing of minerals. And it's true, most of the African governments are now moving away from the old colonial, approach or concept of mining raw materials and exporting them, then bringing back finished products. But for you to do that, you need energy. Because if you're going to put up a tin refinery or a gold refinery or whatever,
lithium refinery,
you will need energy to run that facility.
Right.
And so we understand that demand. Now, what the AU has done as part of the Agenda 2063 flagship projects, we have something called the African Single Electricity Market. So the African Single Electricity Market is about, first of all, standardizing the electricity value chain, but also being able to expand, a conducive market across the continent. What that does is that it improves the economy of scale and ultimately brings down cost for electricity. Because if you can standardize your market and be able to have a seamless cross-border infrastructural development that allows all generations, which is part of the Continental Power System Master Plan, to actually feed into a single market, then you drastically reduce the cost of electricity. And if we can be able to do that, then we can be able to feed the sectors that demand this electricity the most, including the mining sector. So that is why at the moment we really need a lot of not only partners, but also states to actually work together. And that is the idea behind developing the regional power pools. Because we realized that there was still very minimal cross-border trading in energy. In fact, when you look at overall, if you look at intra-Africa trade generally, I mean, you can talk to CFTA is based there, they will tell you, I mean, perhaps anywhere between 16, maybe 18%. But when you zero down to energy, we're talking of something maybe just about 4%. Mm-hmm. And that is quite low. Even when you take a very developed maybe power pool, like maybe the South African power pool, in 2023, I think they traded, when you take electricity alone, Southern Pool area alone maybe was just less than about 8 terawatt hours for a demand of over 340. So that means there's a huge gap in intra-Africa energy trading in general. And unless we can be able to make that seamless, we will not be able to meet the demand of the different sectors, including the industrial sector and mining that you have talked about.
How far away are we from that vision? And what needs to happen to take us there?
We have made some progress. Okay. Actually, we have made some good progress. And I don't have the numbers of it right now, but I know that we have made some good progress. We are not there yet. For sure, we are not there, but we are making there. Of course, that is our dream for the Agenda 2063, for the Africa we want. And we think that, countries are making good effort towards it.
I mean, have you also have some consideration for the carbon markets as part of your program?
No.
Because one thing that I am very particular about is so far we've seen a lot of MRV systems being tested, right? But I am yet to see an indigenous African MRV system where it is based on the knowledge and our experience that we have that is also applicable to the resources that we have, so that 10 years down the line, when others have perfected their MRV systems, we now come back to complain that we are they are imposing international standards on us. Meanwhile, the resources are still our own resources. Is this that area that you guys have looked into to see how we can really position ourselves to develop something that can also be used to peg the international standards when it comes to?
Let me just take that as a challenge for us to work towards that. Yeah, let me take that as a challenge, because I think that, yes, we need to up our game on that, because MRVs are coming, and they're actually probably coming to stay in the long run, because if you see the move that the EU has made, as far as the methane regulation is concerned, now that's taking us towards a real MRV era where we won't run away from it. We are either going to meet it in order for you to access the market, or you're going to be left behind. So I think we cannot bury our heads in the sun. We have to get into a creative mode for us to be able to trade fairly with the rest of the world. But I will take that as a challenge for us to see what we can do as a continent, but also within AFREC in terms of how we can work with our stakeholders today. But I agree with you fully. That is a challenge that we have to open our eyes because it's coming.
Yeah, so the question of young people and how we are creating an ecosystem for young people to participate in the whole energy conversation that we have in terms of innovation, how do we develop their capacity? How are you taking young people along on this changing dynamics that we are having in the energy sector?
Yeah, first of all, actually, I think AU also has quite a number of young people. Because, generally the demographics of the continent is young.
Yeah.
But also we see even in member states, different sectors within the energy space, subsectors within the energy space. There are a lot of young people. But also deliberately, we run what we call, I think, the AU Young Professionals Program. That they usually bring in young professionals, sort of attachment to work, internship, and things like that for about, I think, a year or so, 6 months, 1 year. And that is a way of developing young talent so that they can always be available wherever the opportunity arises. But also we have youth programs that they usually meet occasionally at the headquarters for different youth development programs, and how we can be able to accelerate the role of youth generally, not only in energy, but in different aspects. Because even the mining sector that you talked about earlier on, there are a lot of young people there.
So are these conversations that when you meet African energy ministers, is it part of the conversations that you have about with them, or it's just the broader? Because these things are very important, the equity concerns.
They are. Of course, there is another department that deals with youth issues. I wouldn't be the best placed person to talk about what the youth program agenda for AU is, but I know there is a department that works and thinks about youth programs in general and all initiatives for the youth on the continent. And I think the most important thing that you're saying is that we must be conscious about youth participation in all aspects of our work, whether it's in the energy sector, mining sector, agriculture, and so on. We should be able to be youth conscious, and I don't think it's just also at the AU level. I think even at the national level. Many governments are very conscious. That's why you find perhaps there's a minister for the youth, there's a department for the youth, there are some preferential initiatives for the youth, like startup capitals and things like that. So many countries are cognizant of the fact that the youth constitute a huge component of the future of their country. And that means you cannot ignore their contribution and space within the development agenda. So it doesn't start at AU, it starts at the national level, in my view. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Before you conclude,
yes.
And
you have a question for me?
Yeah, yes. A question for you, but a nice one.
Yes.
Just I wanted to, because I've been coming to Accra for many years now, and I was told that in Ghana, they name people based on the day they were born.
Ah, yes.
So today I wanted to give me a Ghanaian name.
Okay, so what day were you born?
I was born on Tuesday.
On Tuesday.
So what would be my Ghanaian?
Your Ghanaian name will be Kwabena. Kwabena.
Kwabena.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next time I'm going to introduce myself. I am Bob Felix Ocitti.
All right. So let me do that for you. Hello, guys. Today we've had Bob Felix Ocitti, a senior policy officer in charge of a research oil and gas program at the Africa Energy Commission of the African Union. Join us to talk about everything energy. And we are very grateful that you've been able to join us. So please follow us on all our platforms, Facebook, on LinkedIn, and wherever else you get your favorite podcast. Until the next episode, have been Kodzo with Kwabena Ocitti.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And this has been the Blind Spot. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on Blindspot Africa, your platform for insightful discussions on promoting inclusive resource governance across the continent. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave your feedback or reviews. Stay tuned for our next episode.